had a great question from Denise last week asking exactly what I meant by undulating terrain in her training program. I'm Kirsten Todd, your coach here at Hooked on Running, and this is Ask the Coach for the 6th of November 2019. You'll find most workouts in your program will have the type of terrain specified. Now, I know it's not always possible to find a course that fits exactly what you've got scheduled for that day, but there are good reasons for running on the different types of terrain that I've specified. So firstly, let's take a look at flat terrain, which seems pretty obvious what flat means, but you'd be surprised how unflat some seemingly flat routes are. Here's a look at a flat route that I like to use. I mean, even this, which I think is pretty flat, and this really surprises me here that it actually is a bit of a hill at the start there. I've never noticed it. Flat terrain's really great for recovery runs. It's also good when you're getting back into running when you've had a bit of time off. Or it can also be used for when you're extending out the time on your legs. For example, I can give you more running if you're doing it on the flat than if you're doing it over a hilly course. I mean, I know in theory that running is easy over a hilly course. You can make running easy over a hilly course. It shouldn't really take any more out of you than running on the flat if you're running easy. But it generally does, of course. Your pace should be able to be adjusted up the hills to reduce the effort. But in my experience, I find that we tend not to do that. Not at least until we've had an awful lot of experience or an awful lot of nagging from me to slow you down going up some hills. The other thing about running on a hilly course rather than a flat course with respect to the wear and tear on your body is you can't really adjust your effort for running downhill. It's just harder on your legs, no matter whether you're trying to go more slowly or not. Probably if you're trying to go more slowly, it's going to be a little bit harder on the quads. So having a flat course to run on for an easy run is going to give your legs a nice bit of rest while still getting in the miles. The other times you want to be running on the flat, mostly, are your speed sessions. So you want to be turning your legs over quickly in speed sessions, getting a fast reaction time from the ground and feeling fast. It really helps you get that sense of fast movement if you're doing your speed work on the flat. Fast finishing runs are a really classic example of this. It's great to finish those on the flat or even slightly downhill because I just want you really getting that feeling of finishing fast at the end and finishing strong, not feeling like you're labouring at the end of a run. So a flat finish or even slightly downhill is great for that fast finishing run and getting your legs turning over quickly and actually feeling really good at the end of a run. The other thing about fast finish run is it's best to try to plan your fast finishes over a fairly straight course. So if you have to slow down to go around lots of corners, it's really going to put the brakes on your fast finish. I'll give you an example of this, looking at a park run with one of our guys down in South Australia. You can see if you've watched the little green dot up here, and it moves along and he comes up to a corner. He's running for 14 a k pace here, and then as it goes around the corner, it drops down to 4:45, and you'll see the same thing happening here. Some weird reason his pace always drops down here. I think there might be some kind of building works or something going on there. And down here again at the other end, pace has dropped down to 4:53 a k from 4:14. So you can see that going around corners, particularly if you're having to do sort of a full-on U-turn, and here again his pace has dropped down again, you can see that that's really not conducive to having a fast finish. So you would be really trying to avoid going around corners like that for a fast finishing long run. But you can see with this run here, this would be a perfect run for a fast finishing long run. It's just out and back, and it's pretty much perfectly flat. And by the time you turn around that final corner, there's still a couple of Ks to do a fast finish on. So that would be a really perfect course to do a fast finish. So let's move on to some hills. Thinking about, say a flat to undulating terrain, you ideally have some flat stretches of, maybe about 500 metres up to about 1 kilometre, where you can get some good rhythm going and just a few small hills thrown into the run as well. Profile of a flat to undulating run would look something like this. It's never, completely flat. You've got a few little undulating hills in there, but this is flat enough to be able to get a really good kind of steady rhythm going. It's not going to be too taxing. don't have to think about it too much, just a nice relaxing run. I use that kind of a run where I'm introducing you to hill running, or if you want to do a relatively easy run but have some variety thrown in there. Undulating terrain profile looks a little bit more like this. If adding in some gently rolling hills into your long runs and your tempo runs, it's a really good way to train for a hilly race, and better than doing hill repeat after hill repeat, though there is a place for that. But including that undulating terrain in training gives your body exposure to the sort of terrain it's going to face on race day. So it's going to help you maintain your form over the race course because you've practiced it, both uphill and downhill. There are not many flat fun runs around, so for many races that undulating terrain training is a real must. It's really important to get yourself used to downhill running as well, where you can make up quite a lot of time. I do have an article on downhill running in the members area. The more you run downhills, the better you're going to be at it. And then you're also going to be better at pacing yourselves uphill. So you don't want to be burning too much energy and fall in a heap at the top of a hill. Running downhill means you'll need to be able to turn your legs over quickly, and you can't do that if you're tired from running the uphill. So practicing that sort of uphill and downhill running in training is really invaluable. This is a pretty good example of an undulating run. It's just, really constantly up and down. It's not too hilly, but enough to certainly just get you working and your legs, turning your legs over on the downhill, and really getting you to be able to focus on maintaining some form on those uphills. Another good example of an undulating run is this one. Ideally, you'd probably have another lump of a hill in here, just in the middle there, and that would be like a perfect undulating run. Sometimes you might be given a run that asks you to actually work pretty hard up the hills. So you're not going to be taking it easy. You actually might be, doing a 3 out of 10 easy run and then work your hills 6 out of 10. And I'm still going to ask you to have the mental discipline to maintain your form once you get to the top, because if you're planning on a PB also, or just racing as fast as you can, you do need to develop some mental toughness so that you can push through when your body is screaming at you to stop. So this kind of bit of tough love in training is useful. So if you work hard up the hills and then you force yourself to maintain form or run fast down the hills, just working to getting back into a good rhythm quickly, it's invaluable training. Hilly terrain, probably only going to ask you to run hilly terrain if you're actually training for a hilly run, like a particularly hilly run, say maybe the City to Surf here in Sydney, or some of the trail runs. So this one's a pretty good example of a hilly run. It's just lots of uphill. Looks like there's more uphill than downhill. Of course there's not, but there are a few mean hills in there. So yeah, that's a really good kind of hilly run, because you're never getting, apart from at the end here, you're never really getting much of a chance to kind of just get a good lot of rhythm in. So it's working really hard all the time. Runs over hilly terrain, they're obviously a harder version of the run over undulating terrain. And as I said, they'd be prescribed mostly if you've got a hilly race on the horizon. Really great for developing downhill running strength particularly. The other thing we use hills for is explosive hill sprints and longer hill efforts. So your explosive hill sprints will have you running about 10 to 15, maybe 20 seconds up a hill flat out. And then you take a good rest so that you can explode out of the blocks again for the next hill. They're a much more advanced workout. They will develop your neuromuscular system. So that's the connection between the brain and the muscles, and they're going to help increase what's called your maximal stroke volume of your heart, which is the amount of blood your heart will pump out each beat. So that means your heart will be more efficient and it won't have to pump as many times to get the same amount of blood out and circulating in your body. And that's good because that takes oxygen to your muscles. So those hill repeats, they're not designed to make you a better hill runner specifically, just a better runner overall. Similarly with the longer hill repeats, they're really more about just improving your running strength and your VO2 max rather than making you a better hill runner. So they might be up to about 90 seconds or maybe sometimes 2 minutes. As I said, they're going to improve your VO2 max, which is the amount of oxygen your body can take up and use in a minute. Really good for improving strength as well, and improving running specific strength. So also doing those hill repeats instead of an interval workout on the flat can be a bit less intense from the point of view of impact through your body, because your foot doesn't travel as far in a downward movement before it hits the ground on a hill as it would as if you were running on the flat. So you can get a slightly lower impact workout by doing those hill repeats instead of the flat terrain workouts. I wouldn't substitute all of your flat terrain interval training for hills, but would throw them in, maybe weekly, maybe about every 10 days. I also think that doing some hill repeats can help you cope mentally with a hilly race. I remember I was training for the Balmoral Burn here in Sydney, which is a pretty steep hill. It's about 420 metres uphill. So I was doing a lot of hill repeats, and then I did a few weeks after that just a hilly 5K, which I hadn't done before, and everyone was telling me it was pretty hilly, but I honestly got to the end and said, so where are the hills? So I'm sure it was quite hilly, but I was so used to doing some pretty tough hill repeats that, mentally I sort of felt like I could handle anything. And then the other thing about hill repeats and running on hills generally is that it's fun. It mixes your training up a bit and varies your training, and that's super important. Because quite apart from the physiological reasons for it, it can really help keep you fresh mentally. And that's a really important part of running. If you're kind of losing it mentally, you're going to find it really hard to get the physiological gains that you need, because you're just not going to get out and run as much as you need to.